What happens when a CEO trades his corner office for a drive-through headset and realizes one of his youngest employees is carrying the weight of a whole family? Brent Vance sat quietly in the back of the dark SUV, watching the rain bead and slide down the window. His assistant had just wrapped up another call with their district manager. More customer complaints. A few high turnover numbers in store 12. Low morale. A new hire quit after less than 2 shifts. Brent sighed and rubbed at the stubble on his jaw. He had bought the fast food chain 8 years ago, back when it was struggling. 16 stores now spread across 3 states. He'd turned it around with smart logistics and better sourcing. But lately something felt off. The company had grown too fast. He hadn't set foot on the floor of a single location in over a year. Most of the new hires wouldn't have a clue who he was. And that's exactly what he needed. "Let's do it," Brent said suddenly. "I want to work a shift. Go in as a trainee." No announcement, no heads up. His assistant blinked. "Which location?" "Store 12. The one in Springfield." She hesitated. "You've never been there in person." "Even better." 2 days later, Brent stood in the employee break room of Store 12. His hair was dyed a little darker, his beard trimmed into a different shape. A pair of generic glasses on his face. His name tag read Ben. He wore the same dark polo and visor as everyone else. No one gave him a second look. This store was short-handed badly. The district manager had said it was due to a flu wave, but talking to the shift leads earlier, Brent found out the truth. The general manager, Calvin, had a habit of cutting hours at random. Budget reasons, he'd say. But it left the team scrambling. Brent was paired with a young woman named Freya Kessler on the front counter. She was fast, polite, and clearly trying to carry more than one role at a time. "Hey, new guy," she said, tying her apron. "You ever work in food before?" "Sort of," Brent shrugged, pulling on gloves. "Long time ago." "I'll follow your lead." "You'll be fine," she said, tapping the screen for an order. "Just don't freeze up when it gets loud." It got loud fast. A busload of high schoolers pulled in. The drive-through lines snaked around the back. The kitchen was struggling. Orders piled up on the screen and the headset kept buzzing. Brent stood in front of the fries station, moving as fast as he could. But it was clear they were understaffed. The manager, Calvin, didn't step in to help. He paced around the back, barking orders, sipping from a giant soda cup. "Freya, why is this counter backed up?" Calvin snapped. "We're down 2 people and Ben's still learning." "Then move faster." Freya didn't answer. She just kept working. Later, during the quick break they were allowed, Brent sat next to her on the bench outside. "You okay?" he asked. "You've been running since we got here." She gave a tired smile. "It's always like this." "Why do you stay?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Because I need the hours. I've got bills." He didn't push. Not yet. The second half of the shift was worse. A customer got the wrong order and Brent tried to step in to apologize. Calvin interrupted. Hey, don't talk to customers unless you're trained for it. Just to your station." Brent swallowed his words and stepped back. The customer stormed out. By the end of the shift, Brent's back ached. His hands were greasy, his shirt stained. But what stuck with him wasn't the exhaustion. It was the kid on grill. He couldn't have been more than 17. Skinny, quiet, but sharp. He moved fast, handled 3 stations on his own, and never once complained. Brent watched him refill sauces, wipe down trays, flip burgers, and still help the rookie next to him. When the shift ended, Brent found him outside, leaning against the back wall, scrolling on his cracked phone. "Hey," Brent said, "you really kept the place running today." The kid looked up. "Thanks. You're the new guy, right?" "Ben?" "Yeah. You're Kyler." "I do mostly grill. Sometimes prep if they need." Brent nodded. "You've been here long?" "Little over a year." "You in school?" Kyler shook his head. "Dropped out?" "Had to." Brent raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Kyler hesitated, then looked away. "My mom's sick. Dad's gone. I got 2 little sisters. Rent's due every month. I work full-time here, and weekends I do dishwashing at the diner across town." Brent felt the words hit like a punch. You're supporting your whole family? Kyler nodded. Trying to. It's not enough, but I do what I can. Brent didn't know what to say. He just nodded slowly. That night, he went back to his hotel room and sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The kid reminded him of himself when he was younger. Struggling to get by. No help. No safety net. He pulled out his notebook and started writing everything down. Calvin's behavior, the understaffing, Freya's workload, Kyler's story. He wasn't finished. Tomorrow, he'd come back. And things were going to change. Brent arrived before sunrise the next morning. The air was cold and sharp, made harsher by the fluorescent glow spilling from the store's windows. A dented, rust-red sedan with a missing hubcap was parked crooked near the side entrance. Inside, only one person moved behind the counter, Kyler. He was already in uniform, head down, cleaning the soda nozzles with a damp cloth. Brent pushed the door open, the bell above giving a weak chime. Kyler didn't look up. We're not open for another 20 minutes. I'm on shift, Brent said, stepping inside. Kyler raised his head, recognition flickering across his face before he nodded, then turned back to scrubbing. Where's everyone else? Brent asked, glancing around the empty lobby. Still coming in. I open most mornings. They don't like giving the early shift to people who don't show. Brent hung his jacket on the back hook. You always open alone? Kyler rinsed the cloth in a bucket of sanitizer. Usually. Sometimes Rita helps. But she called off this week. Her kids got something. The register lights flickered on and Brent joined him behind the counter. The silence stretched as they worked. Kyler didn't waste movement. Every step was measured, every task done without hesitation. He didn't check his phone. He didn't complain. His focus was absolute. When the door squeaked open again, it was Freya, bundled in a patchy coat, cheeks red from the cold. Didn't think you'd last 2 days, she said, setting her bag down. You look rough already. Brent laughed lightly. Is it that obvious? Kyler didn't comment, just moved to the back to start prepping for breakfast. Freya leaned against the counter, stretching her fingers. You're in luck, she said. Calvin's not in till noon. You'll get a few hours without him breathing down your neck. Brent nodded, then turned to the register, watching her log in. Her movements were fast, but there was a slight limp in her left leg he hadn't noticed before. You okay? He asked. Yeah, she said, brushing it off. Twisted my ankle 2 nights ago. Didn't have time to rest it. You could have called in. Her laugh was dry. And missed the only shift this week over 6 hours? No thanks. The door opened again. A man in his 50s walked in, shoulders hunched, wearing a delivery uniform. He didn't greet anyone, just dropped 2 boxes of frozen patties near the walk-in, then left without a word. Kyler returned with a tray of hash browns and slid it into the warmer. Inventory came short again, he muttered. We're missing eggs. Freya cursed under her breath. I'll check the back, Brent offered, wanting to help. Kyler stopped him. They won't be there. Last Thursday we got shorted too. Calvin said he'd fix it, but nothing changed. Brent stared at the walk-in door. So what happens when we run out? We figure something out, Freya said, already tapping her screen to mark items unavailable. The breakfast rush came fast, mostly older regulars, retirees, construction workers, a nurse still in scrubs. They were patient but noticed the delays. Brent handed out coupons to anyone who waited more than 5 minutes. No one had told him to, but it felt like the right thing. Kyler took over drive-through halfway through the shift, headset on, fingers flying across the screen. He barely glanced up as he took orders, packed bags, and kept the warmer stocked. Freya leaned over to Brent between 2 orders. He doesn't take breaks. Brent glanced toward the back. Ever. Not when it's busy. Think he's afraid if he stops. Everything falls apart. By 10, the line had eased. Brent stepped into the back hallway to grab more napkins and overheard a phone call coming from behind the office door. The voice was muffled, but unmistakably Calvin's. Tell her I already adjusted payroll. We're not adding hours just because someone's whining about scheduling. If they don't like it, they can walk. The tone was dismissive. Brent stepped back before he was seen and returned to the front. As the lunch prep began, a teenager in a black hoodie entered through the side door, looking lost. Freya waved him over. "You must be Aaron. First day." The boy nodded nervously. "Hang up your stuff. I'll show you how to do the fryers." After he walked away, she turned to Brent. "New hire. Third one in 2 weeks. The last guy quit after his second close." Brent adjusted his visor. "How bad are close shifts?" Freya didn't answer. She just raised her eyebrows and handed him a tray of buns to restock. By noon, Calvin arrived, sunglasses on, sipping iced coffee. He didn't acknowledge anyone. Just went straight to the office. Freya tensed slightly. "He's usually worse after lunch," she murmured. Sure enough, an hour later he walked out and stood near the drive-thru, arms crossed. "Kyler, that order's late. You're slowing down." Kyler, still manning the window, didn't look over. "I'm waiting on nuggets. They're still in the fryer." "Then you should have dropped them earlier." Freya stepped in. "We didn't get the delivery on time this morning. We're short on prep." Calvin ignored her. "I'm talking to Kyler." Kyler exhaled slowly but didn't respond. The customer at the window drove off without their drink. Brent chased them down with it, apologizing. When he returned, Calvin pulled him aside. "Ben, right?" Brent nodded. "You've worked 2 shifts. I need to know if you're useful or just another deadweight." Brent kept his tone level. "I'm learning, trying to help where I can." "Good. We don't have time for people who coast. If you want hours, earn them." The rest of the shift dragged under his watch. Calvin didn't help. He corrected loudly, criticized openly, and never once thanked anyone. When a customer complained about cold fries, he blamed Aaron and sent him to the back to mop instead. After the rush, Kyler was restocking sauces when Brent walked over. "You good?" Brent asked, wiping his hands. Kyler didn't look up. "I've worked worse." "You shouldn't have to." Kyler shrugged. "It's just a job. You figure out how to get through it." Brent hesitated, then asked, "You ever thought about moving up? Maybe shift lead?" Kyler laughed softly. "I asked once. Calvin said I was too quiet. Said leaders need to speak up." Brent didn't respond. He just watched the kid drop mustard packets into the bin one by one. The shift ended at 5. Freya offered Kyler a ride home, but he declined. "Bus is cheaper," he said, pulling on a faded hoodie. Brent followed him out. "Where you headed?" "North side. Takes about 40 minutes. Brent nodded slowly. "You working tomorrow?" "Double. Open and mid," someone called out. Brent looked away, jaw tight. "See you then," Kyler said, walking toward the bus stop. Brent stood in the parking lot, watching him disappear down the sidewalk. He wasn't just seeing poor management anymore. He was seeing fatigue baked into the walls. Young people carrying more than their share. A system that squeezed them with no room to breathe. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. "Carla," he said once it picked up. "I need to sit down with the regional HR team. Tomorrow. And get me the full payroll and scheduling data for Store 12. I want names, hours, turnover, all of it." He hung up. Tomorrow he wouldn't be wearing a visor. Brent walked through the doors of Store 12 at precisely 11 the next morning, not in uniform, not in disguise. No visor, no name tag, just a navy sport coat over a charcoal dress shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow and a folder tucked under his arm. His presence stopped the morning shift dead. Freya was at the counter, halfway through ringing up a customer. She blinked twice, uncertain, then glanced at Kyler, who had just stepped out of the kitchen with a tray of chicken patties. Kyler froze in place. The tray tilted slightly in his hands. Calvin emerged from the back office seconds later, holding a clipboard and chewing on a pen cap. His gaze landed on Brent, and it took a full 2 seconds before recognition clicked. "Brent?" Calvin's voice cracked slightly. "You're here." Brent nodded once. "Mind stepping into the office with me?" Calvin glanced at the others. "I mean, sure. Just give me a minute to." Brent didn't wait. He turned and walked toward the back, pushing the office door open. Calvin followed with uncertain steps. Inside, Brent laid the folder on the desk and opened it slowly. His tone was calm, even. There was no anger in his voice, but no room for excuses either. I've spent the last 2 days working your floor. I've seen how your team runs short-staffed during peak hours. I've seen you cut hours without cause. I've seen new hires thrown into chaos without proper training. And I've seen you walk past it all like it's beneath you. Calvin raised his hands halfway as if to slow the conversation. Look, I didn't know you were coming. If I'd known. You shouldn't have to know, Brent interrupted. This store doesn't need a babysitter to function properly. It needs a leader. Someone who builds the team up, not tears it down. I've hit all my cost metrics, Calvin said quickly. Labor was down 10% this quarter. Food waste is lower than last year. And I've met every quarterly target you sent. Brent leaned in slightly. At what cost? You met targets by gutting shifts and burning out the people who actually keep this place running. You under-delivered on inventory and passed the fallout to the floor. You ignored repeated scheduling conflicts and brushed off legitimate concerns. And worst of all, you've built a store culture where silence is survival. Calvin looked toward the window, jaw working. I've been doing this job for 12 years, he said finally. You want results? This is how you get them. Kids don't need hand-holding. They need to toughen up. Brent's voice dropped. One of your kids is working 2 jobs to keep his family off the street. Another twisted her ankle and still showed up because she couldn't afford to lose hours. You talk like these are numbers. They're people. And they deserve better. Calvin opened his mouth, but Brent cut him off. You're being reassigned. Effective immediately. You'll report to the regional office by Friday. HR will follow up with next steps. You're firing me? I'm holding you accountable. If you want to stay with this company, you're going to start over. Somewhere smaller. Somewhere you'll be managed closely. And if I hear one more complaint about your leadership style, you won't be working here at all. Calvin's face flushed red, but he didn't argue. He stood, picked up his clipboard, and walked out without another word. Brent stayed in the office a moment longer, breathing steadily. Then he gathered the folder and stepped back into the kitchen, where half the staff was pretending not to eavesdrop. Freya looked up first. Is he gone? Yes, Brent said. As of today. Kyler stood at the prep table, hands motionless over the lettuce bin. So, who's in charge now? Brent met his eyes. You are. At least for today. Kyler blinked. What? I need someone who understands how this place actually works. Someone who shows up, keeps things moving, and earns respect by example. That's you. Kyler shook his head. I've never run a full shift. You've been running them. Just without the title. He hesitated, glancing toward Freya. She gave him a small nod. Brent continued, you'll have support? I've already arranged for a senior shift lead from Store 3 to rotate in for the next 2 weeks. You'll shadow them, learn the ropes, and we'll revisit the title officially after that. You interested? Kyler didn't answer right away. He looked down, then back up. Yeah, he said finally. I am. Brent turned to the rest of the staff. I'm not here to give speeches. But I will say this, things are going to change. No more surprise hour cuts. No more ignored supply issues. And no more silence. If something isn't working, I want to hear about it. Aaron, the new hire, stood near the back, still holding a mop handle. His eyes didn't leave Brent. You sticking around today? He asked quietly. Brent smiled. Not as a trainee. But yes. He spent the next hour reviewing the walk-in inventory, cross-referencing it with the last 3 deliveries. It was worse than he thought. Items were being shorted consistently and no one had followed up. Brent called the supplier directly, bypassing the district office. A new delivery was promised within 48 hours with a credit applied. He pulled Freya aside near the end of her shift. Tell me about Rita, he said. The one with the kid. Freya adjusted her visor. Single mom. Works nights mostly. Reliable, but she's been on thin ice with Calvin since she asked for set days. He didn't like being told what to do. She still want hours? Yeah. Just can't swing last-minute shifts. I'll make sure she gets a stable schedule. And time off when she needs it. That should have been standard. Freya gave a short nod. Thanks. As she turned to leave, Brent added, You ever consider management training? She laughed once. Not sure I've got the patience. You've got the judgment. We can teach the rest. Think about it. By close, the store was holding steady. Kyler had stepped into the role naturally, delegating tasks without raising his voice, backing up Aaron when the fryer timer glitched, and checking in with the kitchen mid-rush. Brent watched from the side, only stepping in when needed. At the end of the night, Kyler pulled off his headset and joined Brent by the back door. Wasn't perfect, he said, voice low. No shift ever is, Brent replied. But it ran better than it has in weeks. Kyler looked down at his shoes, then back up. You really think I can lead a team? I do, because you already are. He nodded once, quietly. As Kyler stepped out into the night, Brent stayed behind, locking the back door and walking the line of booths one last time. The chairs were up. The lights were dimmed. The place didn't look different, but it felt different, and that was the start. 2 weeks passed before Brent returned to store 12. This time, he didn't wear a headset or stand behind a fryer. He came during the afternoon lull, when the dining room was half full and the kitchen was holding steady between waves. He stepped inside quietly, taking a seat at a corner table near the windows. No announcement, no clipboard, just a cup of coffee and an eye on the floor. Kyler was at the front counter, headset looped around his neck, tapping through a tablet. He wore the same black polo, but there was a lanyard clipped to his belt now denoting shift responsibilities. He wasn't just filling gaps anymore. He was coordinating the floor. He didn't see Brent right away. Brent watched as Kyler moved between stations with a kind of careful alertness, not rushed, not hesitant. He checked on fryer timers without hovering, called out prep needs calmly, and nodded briefly when a younger team member asked about clocking out early for a doctor's appointment. He listened first, then answered. That alone told Brent more than any report could. Freya passed by with a tray of ketchup packs and napkins, paused, then doubled back when she spotted Brent. You're not here to audit us again, are you? Brent smiled and stood. Not today. Good. Because we just got the new register software, and I swear it was built by someone who's never worked a shift in their life. Still working out the bugs? Every day's a new surprise, but it's faster once you get past the weird layout. Glad you stuck with it. I wasn't going to run for the door just because it got uncomfortable. Besides, Kyler asked me to help train the new batch. Couldn't say no to that. She nodded toward the back, where 2 teenagers were sorting buns and frozen patties under Kyler's supervision. We've actually got a wait list now. People want to transfer in from other stores. Brent raised an eyebrow. That's good to hear. Not perfect, she said, lowering her voice. Still short on weekend closers. But we're holding. Calvin left a bigger mess behind than we realized. We're still digging out. Progress is good. Stability takes longer. Freya gave a quick nod and disappeared behind the counter. Brent approached Kyler as he was reviewing shift notes on the tablet. The younger man looked up, surprised, but didn't break stride. Didn't expect you today, Kyler said, tapping to lock the screen. I wanted to see how things were moving without sending another memo. Kyler wiped his hands on a towel tucked into his waistband. We're getting there. Still some rough patches. But it's not freefall anymore. What's the hardest part? Scheduling. You can't just fill slots. You have to be fair about it. I didn't realize how many people were carrying stuff outside of here school. Kids, second jobs. You start moving one shift, and you're pulling threads all over the board. You're learning the weight of decisions. Yeah, and I've had to ask for help a few times. I thought that would make people think I couldn't handle it, but it's been the opposite. Brent nodded. That's leadership. Knowing when to lean on others. Kyler leaned against the prep fridge. Rita came back last week. She's doing evenings 4 times a week now. Said she finally feels like she can plan things again. I'm glad. You've helped give her that. I didn't do it alone. No. But you showed it was possible. They were interrupted by a voice from the front. A woman in her 40s stood at the counter with a young boy, maybe 6 or 7, tugging at her hand. Kyler excused himself and walked over, crouching slightly to say something to the boy, who laughed. The woman smiled and handed him a small envelope, then turned and left. Kyler returned and handed the envelope to Brent. What's this? She's a regular. Her kids started drawing pictures of the team. Said it made him feel safe here. Brent opened it. Inside was a crayon drawing of the store with smiling stick figures behind the counter. One of them had a headset. Another had a ponytail. Tiny names were written under each. He folded the paper carefully and slid it into his coat pocket. Kyler was watching him. It's not just food anymore. It's a place people count on. You've made it that. I think we all did. Brent looked around. The energy was different now. Not perfect. Not effortless. But stable. And real. He pulled out a small notepad and wrote something down quietly. I've been thinking about something, he said. Kyler waited. We're starting a new pilot program. Internal development for store leads under 25. Training, mentorship, and cross-store leadership experience. I want you in the first round. Kyler blinked. You sure? You've already done the hardest part. You earn trust. The rest is just structure. Kyler didn't answer right away. He looked out the window toward the parking lot, then back at the kitchen. I'll do it. But only if I can keep my hours here. I've got people depending on me. Brent nodded. We'll work around it. Kyler looked down, then back up. Thanks. For not just walking away after that first shift. I didn't save this place, Brent said. You did. They shook hands, firm and quiet. Brent left before the dinner rush, passing new crew members he hadn't met yet. One was learning how to clean the milkshake machine. Another was double-checking allergen protocols with a laminated chart. It wasn't flawless, but it was organized, intentional, alive. He stepped into the fading sunlight and paused outside, glancing back once. Store 12 didn't look different from the outside. Same faded red trim, same buzzing sign. But inside, a 17-year-old who once kept his head down to survive was now leading others with quiet steadiness. A young woman who once limped through shifts had become a trainer. And a culture that had been run on fear was growing into something sustainable, earned, not imposed. Brent walked to his car, opened the door, and sat for a moment in silence. He didn't need a report to tell him what had changed. He had seen it for himself.